welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. So, if you didn't get to see the hearings on Capitol Hill surrounding the pistol brace ban, you need to. Jim Jordan, Matt Gaetz, and several other reps, Thomas Massie, took Dittelbach, who is the chairperson of the ATF, and they took him to task. Gaetz ripped on the ATF for losing thousands of guns. Massie ripped on them for the brace being made legal, and then that the original brace would be made illegal because of the proceedings that, or the fiat that Dittelbach did by changing the ruling on making braces illegal. Now, Dittelbach danced around this, but there was a representative from Texas, and I'm trying to remember his name. He went off on him, and it was hilarious because what he did was he was saying, "You've just made millions of people felons," and Jim Jordan echoed this statement. But what they did is that it was masterfully crafted of what they said. They asked very pointed questions at whether a brace makes a pistol, like an AR pistol, more deadly, as if it helped increase cyclic rate or accuracy for a long range. And all of them were pretty obvious. The gentleman that I was talking about from Texas, he straight up said that these people don't know what the hell they're talking about. We all know this. It's glaring to see that that Dittelbach, the chairperson of the ATF, is absolutely outside of his depth. He was ill-prepared, just like most people when you see them from this administration go before the House subcommittees. He couldn't answer questions directly. He stammered. Now, this is where I'm a little worried. There's a group of people that will see this and say that Dittelbach totally owned these guys. We're at that point where abject reality, there are two groups of people looking at the same circumstances or same video and coming to different conclusions. Anyone who is into reason and thought and self-ownership and can critically think can see that those hearings on Capitol Hill for this pistol brace rule showed that there was absolutely no way this should be accepted. Jim Jordan went off on the bump stock cases being ruled against by the court, that the ATF arbitrarily made the bump stocks illegal under Trump, and then now, after several millions of dollars being spent in court cases, the bump stock ban is being repealed. It has to be, because SCOTUS is now looking at this stuff and they're seeing that this is actually not legal. And this goes back to the Bruen decision. The Bruen decision means that there's a set of criteria that they have to look at, and they have to look at precise case law to justify their rulings. Now, why is the Bruen decision, and thanks Iraq Veteran 8088 Eric, he's the one that brought this up last night in a video about rules, gun laws in the 1900s. And what was interesting was that the only case law that starts getting into prohibition of firearms for certain individuals or certain, regulation of firearms in general comes from the slave era. And he makes a very valid point in that trying to use slave era law to prohibit something in 2023 probably won't sit well with left or right. So that gives me a little bit of hope that we're in the right. Well, I know we're in the right, but that the people that are zombies that usually don't accept universal truth for universal truth won't have a choice. Because if anything, slavery is a big no-no, and it always has been. It's a scar in American history, but it's part of our history, and most of us know that it happened, and we own it. The thing that we all need to remember is that nobody that was alive back then is alive now. No one today is a slave. No one today is a slave owner, with the exception of like the Fed and like some giant corporations that have found a way to make money off of keeping people very poor. Now, I am excited mostly at seeing multiples of these. Thomas Massey's speech, I mean, we really need more Thomas Massey's in the House, because he was very concise and he was very pointed, very scientific in my mindset, where he chose his words very carefully. He even brought a model of the very first version of the pistol brace to say, how is this illegal when you deemed it legal? And under the new rules, can you actually justify banning something that you said was 100% legal at the time? Jim Jordan actually got constructive intent off the table for the ATF, thanks to Diddlebox screw up there. It is now 100% okay, because it's now out in the open that the ATF's lead dude said you could do this and it would be fine. You can pull the brace off your gun, and that and keep it, and that means that you no longer have constructive intent. So unless they catch you with another crime, you are okay to have your pistol brace. It would be advisable from legal counsel, and I'm not a lawyer, and you take this advice as advice to you, or as if you want to follow it, you follow it. If you don't follow it. It was advised that you could just take it off, and you could throw it in a drawer, and it would still be okay. That is a huge leap forward from what was originally intended with this, because what originally was intended with what was stated in the ban was that if you took it off, you had to destroy said brace before they would consider it taken care of, and you had to have evidence of that destruction. Now, I would still be hesitant, because the government will try to hem you up and tie you up without a doubt. But the simple fact that you had Diddlebach, the guy in the ATF, say that no, you can just take this off, because the original way this was put out was you either had to take the brace off, destroy the brace, and restore the firearm back to its original configuration, or you had to destroy the firearm, or you had to install a new barrel. Now, if you have a Kalashnikov or an MP5, that becomes a lot larger deal than it would be for an AR-15, okay? Because you have to have presses, and you have to have some knowledge, and you have to have, in the case of the MP5, you'd have to drill out a pin from the trunnion, press the barrel out, install a new barrel, repress a pin, and then weld it back in. In the case of Kalashnikov, you'd have to depopulate the entire barrel. So you'd have to take the gas block off, the front side off, and then and punch the barrel pin. You'd also have to take the rear side off, and then you would be able to punch the barrel out, and then reverse all that stuff, and then you would be in compliance to make it a 16.5-inch barrel, to install a 16.5-inch barrel. But with this slip up in Congress, it looks like that is not a thing. Now, what is even more telling is Dittelbach was asked directly, how does this turn this into a short-barreled rifle? And he said, well, it's simple. It's because of how they use the pistol brace. And then one of them, and I don't remember which one of the guys talking to him, outright stated, I think it was Thomas Massey, maybe it was Jim Jordan, who said that you outright said that this device does not make it a short-barreled rifle. You're now saying that it's how they use the brace that determines if something is a short-barreled rifle or a machine gun. And he goes, that is absolutely incorrect. We have defined definitions that have been in place since the NFA have been a thing, and you have to stick to those. Now, with the Bruen decision, there is historical precedence that says exactly that, because you can't flip back and forth, you can't make a ruling, and then rule that up to 40 million Americans are now felons. That's one of the reasons why the bump stock thing actually gained legs and they reversed it. Now, what is even more interesting and more telling was that he couldn't answer questions. Matt Gaetz grilled him on them losing thousands of firearms, not ones confiscated, but actual firearms that were part of the ATF's use for agents. Now, I didn't know about this, but Gaetz goes off on it, and I did look it up. It is correct. The ATF was burglarized, and it was a civilian contractor that had ended up taking these firearms. Now, they've gotten some of them back, but not all of them back. Now, let's think about that. A law enforcement agency tasked with tracking and maintaining firearms databases couldn't keep track of their own firearms. And Gaetz goes on. He goes, they had a database. They had a secret database that they shouldn't have had, that they had to delete of firearms users or firearms owners because it's illegal. It's in statute that they can't have a registry. That's why it's even illegal, the way I see it, and the way the statute actually reads, probably is still illegal, for them to even try to get you to register an NFA item, because a registry is not supposed to exist. That's in law from days past, because anyone with a brain knows that if there's a registry, a gun registry, they know exactly where a firearm is, they know exactly who to send to go get it. And that was the whole point of not having a database, is you cannot be able to trace someone down and go arrest them. Gaetz went so far as to say, so what you're going to do, or what you have done, and I don't know if it was Gaetz, maybe it was Jim Jordan, who said, so what you're going to do is you're going to go after people, you're going to go after people that made these things, sue to get records, then go after those individuals. And that's illegal, because this was 100% legal. Now, I hope that this sticks and they find a way to repeal this unjust mandate, executive fiat that made something that was 100% illegal. But it also, if this gets found this way, the case that I've been talking about so much, the CRS firearms case, definitely puts that into focus even more, because this wasn't a device that you could modify and get it to work if you had the knowledge. But even by the ATF's admission that they couldn't get, they got one of the four to have a hammer strike after they had a expert work on that device. It lends more credence to that simple fact that these guys couldn't get something done without major modification, and then they still didn't get it 100% correct, and they still went after Matt Hoover and the gentleman that made the auto keys and convicted them and threw them in jail. Now, again, we live in challenging times. We just lost Washington State to a firearms ban. There are several suits out for that already. We almost lost Colorado. At the same time, Nebraska and Florida went constitutional carry. Now, what's weird about Florida is for some reason constitutional carry there means you can't open carry. I've never been a huge fan of open carry anyway. I see that as people identifying themselves as a target, to be honest. You want to be that gray man that they don't know is there. It also, I believe that the concealed carry movement is a better option in that it tends to set people, their fears aside. Now, I really don't care about their fears. Your rights are your rights. But it goes a long way. You can attract more flies with honey than you can with vinegar. It goes a long way that they never know who is armed. Some of their friends that they've thought for years would never carry a gun, just for them to find out that they've been carrying a gun their entire time. That is impressive, to me anyway. And when you start looking at these things, that's probably more so the case anyway. You look at the situations that we're in the world, crime statistics are going up. If you look at the polling that's going on, the gun ban genie is not there. They cannot stroke that lamp enough where there's enough people that will side with them. There is initially, after a shooting, there's initial pull for on the emotional side that even I myself have been pissed off enough and said, hey, maybe we need to think about something, and then I catch myself because I'm human and smart, or smarter than those guys. That's the stupidest damn thing you can do. Giving them any power right now in a moment of crisis just seems to be biting us in the ass, to be blunt. And especially in the firearms community, we've lived. I've lived through the 1994 firearms, assault weapons ban that Biden likes to talk about. It did not, in any way, shape, or form, help, despite what the left is like to say. Just like they like to say now, since they've changed the rule definitions and how the CDC reports gun deaths, that firearms death among the youth is supposed to be the number one cause of death, when in reality it's still abortion and it's still accidental death. When you include 18 and 19-year-olds in that statistic, you start getting into suicide and you start getting into gang violence and crime statistics, where that's where they get the youth are more at risk with firearms. And if you look at larger cities, that's probably true. And that's because those crime is not getting smaller. It's getting larger. We are seeing more crime. New Mexico, I've said this before, I live in Farmington, New Mexico. A very, very, what is considered a rural area. We have, 40, 50,000 people on any given day in northwest New Mexico. Unless it's the first of the month, where we swell with everybody from the surrounding areas coming in supplies and shopping. Now, in that, there has been more shootings and more crime in Farmington than there has been in years. And I am increasingly glad that I have my concealed carry and that I carry everywhere. I'm now in a position where I have my own business where I can carry everywhere, except for that business, unfortunately, because of the business I chose to get into. And that's fine. There are armed security guards in the area, so I feel very safe in that, knowing, because I got to meet them and got to deal with some of that stuff. It's really okay, as long as I don't believe in gun-free zones, because is a bullet magnet. If you've ever played anything like airsoft or paintball and they've allowed vehicles into the area, you realize that they are bullet magnets or paintball magnets or airsoft magnets. I'm assuming that would be the same in an armored carrier. When you're rolling through a city, that they're a magnet for bullet strikes, because they're, they're big, they're loud, and they're a big target. That's what gun-free zones to me always have seemed to be, is that you go in there not being able to defend yourself, perfectly willing to, perfectly capable, but the law, if you followed it to the letter, you are a can of tuna, just waiting to be open. And I think society needs to finally recognize that an armed society is a polite society. And all the fuss and buzz that the media, which is dying, around banning because it makes you feel good, isn't going to work. We have 27 states now that have constitutional carry or have permitting of some kind that allows you to carry a firearm in the United States. That is the majority of the states. That isn't a coincidence. Even blue states like New Mexico are a shall issue permit for concealed carry. They have to have a justifiable reason where you have broken the law, or that you're a felon, or that there is some sort of reason that you cannot carry. That's a long ways from 1980s, where you couldn't conceal carry in large swaths of the United States because they didn't allow you to carry. It was part of that states' rights type of thing. And it wasn't as well enforced that you had to give the American people their rights. Fast forward after, the new decisions that have come down. The Heller decision specifically in that case. And now concealed carry is the law of the land. And this is where the left is going to have to take an L eventually. They need to recognize this, because this is a big part of the American experience. The reason why we're seeing these crime statistics pop so high is there's no recourse, there's no consequences for their actions. You can't have Soros funded DAs that keep performing catch and release on society, where people have done really, really bad things and they're released back on to the streets with minimal bail or no bail. Another case in point here is the DA of Chicago and the DA of Alvin Bragg of New York. Both are being sued right now for releasing criminals out on the street that killed someone. And then they're going after things like Trump. It doesn't make sense when Trump's crime really was, Clinton did the same thing. So what do we care? Again, don't care about the orange man. It's just that we seem like we've been at a spot for a while now where we have a two-tier justice system. And that's the part that gives me the heartburn here. Is the poor guy, the working class schmo who's just doing his job and living his life the best he can, and for some reason, he gets in a fight with his neighbor for, a weed or something. And they come to arrest him, and they find out he has a pistol-braced AR-15. Now, is he facing 10 to 20 years in prison now because he had this in possession when they came into his house, because maybe it got physical, maybe something, they had some outlying cause. Maybe they didn't, but the cop went ahead and proceeded to come into his house and find this thing anyway. Believe it or not, that happens. And you can tell this type of thing is what law enforcement has been doing for a while, when you have, specifically in New Mexico, because when they brought the red flag stuff up and the chief of Police and APS, Albuquerque Police Department, APD, when he came up there and said, well, we need this as in our toolbox so we can add it to add more jail time for any crime we find. That's pretty telling considering what they're trying to do now. If the police back then, which was maybe 3 to 5 years ago, they had that mindset then, that means they've always had that mindset. That means that the mindset still continues and persists to this day. That's what they're looking at, is how they can hem you up with more jail time to put you in the prison complex to basically make you a ward of the state and make taxpayers pay for your stay. And other people get rich. It's disturbing. It's heartbreaking for someone who was so, I've admitted this before, I was in love with my country, thinking that my country would never do this. Police departments would never do this type of thing. Fast forward to 2023, post-COVID, where you see, in fact, they will become the brown shirts. In fact, they will come in and they will force their will upon you. And there's little to no recourse for them until some people start standing up. Now, am I telling you to arm yourselves and fight them? No. But what I'm telling you is you conduct your life as you feel it's necessary to conduct it. And the government should have little to no say in any of that, because they've proven that they are completely inept at being able to handle anything that a normal person would have to deal with. The reason why the government exists was that there was supposed to be some sort of framework for society to exist in. And after 240 some odd years, that government has gotten so large and so massive that there's absolutely no way it should continue to exist. And when I say that, I mean the one cool bright spot I've heard about President Trump that I would be all for, and it would actually possibly get me to vote for him, is that he has something called Schedule F that he wants to implement. And what that is where you would go in and fire people like Diddlebach and people that have been in for years that aren't serving the American people, and just retire them. They're done. Now, why I say it's a great idea, but I don't know that I trust Trump to do that, is because he had people like Michael Bolton come in, and he was the one that wanted to bomb Iran and go to war with Iran right away. He had people like Nikki Haley, who were those rhino Republicans. Now, I'm not even a fan of the Republican Party anymore, as much as I once was. That's because I woke up. You can't continue to try to think that you can vote your way out of something. It looks like that day has passed. Our votes in New Mexico, if you ever voted Republican for president, were pretty much wasted anyway. But what I see happening is maybe, the fact that Trump was elected the first time tells me that the system somewhat works, because that was unexpected. Now, they changed a lot of rules in how elections are conducted in a lot of states, and that is, I think, where Trump needs to be fighting, and he needs to quit focusing on fraud, because the fraud wasn't there. Simply put, mail-in ballots are a type of ballot that heavily favors Democrats because of demographics of where Democrats live. They live in larger cities. It's easier to go to collect those. It's easier to get more people to vote when you can send more ballots out to those areas. How do we fix it? Don't know that we can. I know there's a lot of people trying to fix it right now. I suggest anyone who's a fan of New Mexico Black Rifle Operators or Freedom to check out those. They're on YouTube. All those videos are from Forbes, and you can watch the ATF get ripped. Like, share, subscribe, be great.